proactive. So I hope you understand what I mean by that, because, as we're going to see, our whole calling is a calling of being proactive. And I think that's the problem a lot of times with brethren, because in churches don't teach to be proactive. What do churches teach? They teach pray and pay, right? They teach the people sit in the audience, and the pastor comes up and does a song and dance. I can't sing it, I can't dance, so sorry about that. But that's what it is. And the more I can entertain you, the more money you're going to put in the basket when it goes around. And that's really what Christianity is. It's a show. It's a show. So it's not proactive. They don't want people. So even though you get a guy up there and he's giving a good spiel, when somebody gets up to maybe he has something really, really important to what the speaker's saying, yeah, sit down, we'll talk about it later. That's just the way it is. But as believers, this is one of the biggest problems with believers. They're not proactive enough. They're not proactive enough. We have to be proactive. Because we're going to see what the opposite of proactive is. It's being reactive. And you'll see mentally, like I said, everything comes from your nervous system, right? And everything we do comes down to our two things, pain or pleasure. So you don't realize this. The way that Yahweh made us amazing, our body, with 30,000 miles of arteries and all these things in our bodies. But it's the same thing. We have a nervous system that immediately does something when something happens. So just like traveling to the feast, right? Immediately, before you even ponder on it, either it's coming into your brain, the feast I've been there, I gotta get there one way or another. Or it's like, it's too hard to travel. Oh, I want to be there, but maybe not. And you don't even think about it. It happens from your nervous system. Because your nervous system is thinking, is it more pleasurable to go through all this to get there? Or is it going to be more pain? I don't want that PCR test up my nose. It all comes down to that, right? So being proactive, a proactive person makes decisions based on principles, not rules. Last year in our seminar, we were going over how our values shape our life. If you remember, we were going over that. So, I'm going to overlap that a tiny bit, but not much. But just for the people that aren't here, that they understand about our core values to a bit. But like I said, a proactive person makes decisions based on principles, not moods. And if you think about it, most people make decisions based on moods, right? And moods come from what? They come from your emotions. Whether that's, like I remember when I was younger, if you wanted to ask Dad if you could do something, right? You don't just go up and ask him. You're waiting for the right time, You're waiting until he's in a good mood. You're waiting until he got a raise at work. You're waiting until he's all happy. It's like, yeah, go ahead. But if he comes in, and he's all aggravated, and he's, throwing down his hat and whatever, it's like, wait. Might not just get a no, I might get a slap in the face, so I think I'll wait on this. But a proactive person makes his decisions based on principles, not moods. It means your life is a product of your values, not your feelings. Right? And that's why I've given messages before in emotional maturity. At the school we go into this more extensively. But your life is a product of your values, not your feelings. Your decisions, not your conditions, okay? Your decisions, not conditions. Now, you can kind of see a little bit where I'm going with this right off the bat, but as I'm putting this together, even regardless of COVID, as I'm looking at this, I'm saying, wow, how important is this right now, right? Think about it in the situation the world is in right now. Decisions, not conditions. Because if you think about it today, with forced vaccinations and worse what's coming, are people making decisions based on values? If you're making it based on value, there's aborted fetal cells either in the vaccine, and now that I found out, I thought there was several like Pfizer who only had it in the trials, and now we know for sure Pfizer has it in the vaccine. How on earth can anybody anybody with any sense of value injects something in them that was taken from an aborted baby, from a killed baby. And these babies are not 2 and 3 months, of a woman that just accidentally had an abortion. A miscarriage. These are babies that are almost term. And literally, they're cutting the mother open while the baby is alive, taking these body parts that they use. So, again, it's got to be based on values, not feelings, decisions, not conditions. Because if we talked about this in theory, many times, the underground congregation has always been a theory. This is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. Now we're in it, right? So now we're in a situation where I'm dealing with this every month with congregations that are dealing with maybe even death. Elder Vincent can tell you some of the things that are being threatened in the Philippines. But in other places that I don't like to mention because of safety of the brethren, that they're literally facing with not just losing a job, they're facing with death and imprisonment, over these things. I had my 2 chairs here for Moses and... No, you can keep it. It's for Moses and Elisha. I didn't ask for 2 chairs. But this is what we're dealing with. And this is why, like I said, you want to make sure when you're value-based, it doesn't matter what the circumstance is. You're not going to compromise with those values for anything. And like I said, you're not talking about things like missing a feast or making a feast, right? If you miss a feast, you really lost something. And I think over the years, these feasts are really, really important. And who are the people sitting in the chairs today? They're people that have been at feasts before, right? But this is more than a feast, because there's always next year in Jerusalem, right? You're talking about now. You're talking about having your children taken away from you. You're talking about being put in prison. You're talking about not being able to work in society and maybe even be killed. So if there's ever a time that we need to understand this and embrace it, it's now. So a disciple of Yeshua must be proactive to bear fruit and be productive for the kingdom. So it's important because of what's going on in the world today, but this has been our calling since day one, to be proactive. Yeshua, if you think about it, I say this all the time, you're 30 million to 1 that you're called today. And look out in the world today. For everyone that believes like you, there's probably more than 30 million people out there. We're dinosaurs, we're eyesores, right? And now we're really living in a world where everywhere you look, go on Google, go on Yahoo, you can't find one article that's even halfway true. And did Yahweh call you just to sit in the chair and think about it? He called us to be proactive, right? You look at the 12 apostles, and the problem is a lot of times people feel like, well, how can I be proactive? I'm just a regular person. Oh, you mean like the 12 apostles, right? You're a regular person, just like one of the 12 apostles that were fishermen, blue-collar guys. Yeshua comes, right? He's Elohim from heaven. And does he call the Pharisee? Does he call the priest? Does he call the rich Sadducees? Not one. Not one. He calls 12 ordinary men. Did a message on it years ago. It's on the website. He called 12 ordinary men. So again, he didn't call us based on our ability per se. He called us based on our hearts and our values. And will we stay with it? And that's really it. But if we're not proactive, we have a problem right to begin with. That's why I say this is so important. Because if you're not proactive, you have to start thinking after listening to this, why maybe you're having some of the problems in your life? Because you're being useless to Yahweh and His people if you're not proactive. And when you're proactive, what does that mean? You're not reactive. And we're going to see the opposite. And when I show you reactive to proactive, you got to think in your mind, which one am I exhibiting in my life right now? So, a reactive person, he's always worried about concerns, right? Not values. Not what can he influence. He's worried about concerns, not what he can influence. Reactive person always is worried about concerns, not what they can influence. They always have a reason why they fail, right? So they'll fail and they'll say it, but there's always a reason. usually somebody else or their situation. There's always a reason why they can't be proactive. And they are a product of their feelings and their moods and their impulses. And people that are very proactive are very hard to be around. Because one minute they can be the life of the party and all happy, and the next minute, well, they are offended like anything. And it's exhausting. Because the times we're living in now, I don't have time for proactive people anymore. You're talking about life and death and everything else that's going on, and it's not time for not proactive people, reactive people, I'm sorry. Don't have time for reactive people anymore. And reactive people never change, that's the problem. It's a lifestyle of always worried about concerns, not worried about what they can influence. They always have a reason why they fail, blaming of other situations, and like I said, they're a product of their feelings, their moods, and their impulses, and how they're treated by others. I've said this in many sermons. So-and-so looked at me the wrong way. Isn't he? All these things like this. They play the victim. And many times reactive people are gossipers, and like I said, always making excuses for their failures. And let me say this though. Playing the victim is about the most disempowering thing you can do in life. And believe me, it doesn't mean that at times we aren't victimized. We are. As a people, we're all being victimized. Being a victim is the most disempowering thing in the world because you're always going to play that victim part. And we're not victims, we're victors. Philippians 3 and verse 13. Philippians 3 and verse 13. He says, brothers, I do not count myself to have reached the goal, but one thing I do, forgetting the things behind and stretching forward to those things before. I press toward the goal to receive the prize of the victory, the highest calling of Yahweh, Messiah Yeshua. And the sugar. No, we want it. That would stop him being the victim. We don't want him to stop being the victim. Because then he has low self-esteem. Oh, wow. Low self-esteem, huh? You know what my Bible says? No man has ever hated his own flesh. Nobody has low self-esteem. You may have low self-confidence. Like right now, if you told me to take an engine and take it apart and put it together, I don't have confidence I can do that. I have very low confidence when it comes to mechanics, right? But I don't have low self-esteem. It's the opposite. We all esteem ourselves too much. And I'm looking at that and what's happening in the world today, and I'm seeing how evil people are, and it's because of human nature. Power. I'm looking at some of these weasels out there, like this guy from Canada that ought to be put in a prison. The stuff that this guy is doing to people, and he knows what he's doing, and he's an evil person. And you know why he does it? Because he gave a little bit of power, and then that power goes to the head, and then they want more and more and more and more and more. And it's the way human nature is. So nobody ever hated his own flesh. We don't have low self-esteem. We esteem ourselves too much. Because I say, just honestly think to yourself. If you really had low self-esteem, right? If I was honest, had low self-esteem, like I hate myself, I'm a bad person, I really hate myself, well, all of a sudden now, I'm Joe, right? All my family members die, and my house gets burned down, and I lose my job. I should come and be the happiest person in the world because bad things are happening to me and I hate myself. Right? Isn't that the way it works? If somebody is evil, like if Hitler is getting hung, are you going to be sad? No, you're happy because he's an evil person, he's getting what he deserves. So if you really thought you were evil, you'd be the happiest person in the world when bad things are happening to you. But it doesn't work that way. Because when you don't get the things you want, then you're more sad because it's not that you have low self-esteem, it's you have high self-esteem. You love yourself too much. And you got to get your mind off of you, and you got to get your mind on others in the work of Yahweh. That's the way you're going to get out of that, right? That's the only way. So you got to get this concept away. You might have low self-confidence. You may not be confident to do things, but you don't have low self-esteem. We love ourselves too much. And what we need to do is we have to humble ourselves. We have to realize that. We have to repent every day. And we have to realize that we're not good people who sometimes do bad things. We're bad people that praise Yahweh by His Spirit. We can change that. That we can change our nature. And like I said, the world out there is showing us. Because everyday people, maybe even your friends and your families, they're becoming hateful toward people like us. You know, all of a sudden, we're the world problem. You know? Because we won't do this or we won't do that, and they put it in there. And it's just because, like I said, the power that people want. So, a proactive person finds solutions, not excuses. If your life is filled with excuses, then you're reactive. The proactive person finds solutions. And I've said this many times, you heard me say, the quality of your life is in the quality of the questions you ask. If you ask a question, why does this always happen to me? You're going to get the answer, because you're a dummy. Right? That's not the question you ask. Not why does this always happen to me? You have to ask the question, how do I overcome this? Because your mind, like I said, is a master computer. And what you're putting in there, why does this happen to me? Because you're a dummy. No, you got to put in there, how can I overcome this and enjoy the process? What is the answer to my solution? Because there's always an answer to it. Your mind is a master computer. I was saying to somebody yesterday, I find it ironic because lately, every time I'm trying to get into my email, the computer keeps saying to me to prove I'm not a robot. Can you imagine? Did that ever happen to you? I'm saying, a robot is asking me to prove I'm not a robot. I mean, this is insane. You know, like, how would he know? Well, I'm a robot. I would know if you're a responsibility. A proactive person has responsibility. What is responsibility? Response ability. It's the ability to respond. So, when a parent is telling a child, you need to be more responsible, or maybe your boss at work is saying, you have to be responsible. I want people responsible. You know, I want to give you more responsibility on the job site. What do they say? They want you to be able to respond. The ability to respond. That's responsibilities. And what is the opposite? If you're not responsible, then what are you? You're irresponsible. You're either have the ability to respond or you're irresponsible, meaning you don't have the ability to respond to things. And that's why I say the reactive person is the person who doesn't respond. He responds by his feelings and emotions and how he's being treated. The proactive person is the one in any circumstance that can respond. You know, you'll never quit. You'll never walk away. You'll always look for a solution. And even if it's not the best solution, there's got to be a solution. You know, as we're going to see, sometimes the solution is just no. Sometimes it's just wait. But you'll never go back. If you're a proactive person, you just don't quit. And that's what you see a lot of times. You see people just give up. Give up on everything. Go back on their own. So the proactive person has a consistency in their life. They can keep promises, right? If there's somebody who you ask, can you do this, or can you do that, or, you know you can rely on them because they're proactive. It's just in their nature. That one way or another, they're going to try to the best of their ability to keep their promises. A reactive person, most times can't. You know? And there's always a reason why. There's a reason why they can't do it. And of course, there's times that we do things, there's times that we can't. There's times, like I say, I talk about time management. You know, that as a leader, we want to make sure we're on time. You know, if there's a new person out there that I'm going to counsel with, and it's the first time I'm meeting that person, I show up 40 minutes late, I might as well just keep on going. Because here it is, that's his first impression of me, is that I can't even come on time. What good is this? But things happen. Maybe there was an accident. Maybe somebody got hurt. So, you know, there's things that happen, but if you're consistently in your life that you're not responsible, you're irresponsible, then you can't do so much as even keep a simple appointment. Especially if it's with a boss at a job or something that's important, then there has to be some changes that have to be made. Don't let the reality of the things you can do nothing about interfere with the things you can do something about. And this is what happens sometimes, right? Because sometimes those problems in life weigh really, really heavy, and they tear us down. And then we stop being proactive because we're so focused on what we can't change. Like the vaccine, you know? You can't change that. And you can think all you want that it's going to go away or whatever, but it's not going away. You know? So do we just sit there and get depressed and do nothing? No. That's something you can't change. So you don't focus on that, but you focus on what you can change. If you already know now what is going to be the result of that vaccine mandate in the mark of the beast, I'm not going to be able to travel, I'm not going to be able to buy and sell, I'm not going to be able to work. So what would you be doing now? You'd be preparing. And especially the fact that we're in the 6th year, whatever you do in the next year, you get 3 for 1. Yahweh has a sale going on, right? Wow, this is better than Lidl, right? This is better than Costco. 3 for 1, and that's with manna, you know? Manna's on sale. Buy 1, get 2 free. So praise Yahweh for that. Don't let the reality of the things you can do nothing about interfere with the things you can do something about. You can choose your decision, but you can't choose the consequence. Okay? You can choose your decision. Like now I can say, under no circumstance am I taking this. That's my decision. I have free will. But I can't choose the consequence. What happens from there is outside of my control. So I can't worry about it. I can't worry if I'll lose my job, if I'll get put in prison, or I'll get killed. Or maybe worse, maybe they'll threaten my family. You know? So I can choose my decision, but I can't choose the consequence. And that's the problem, that the reactive person is making decisions based on the fearing of the consequence. You ever wonder yourself, when you look at being a person in Yahweh's congregation, you say, well, this is the greatest thing in the world. This isn't religion. This is the truth. You know, I mean, this is every single thing in the Bible makes my life better. I can be a better father. I can be a better worker. I can be a better pastor. I can be a better friend. Everything better. I only get benefits from being a believer. Then why is there a handful of believers and there's billions of people that's not? The reason why is what I just said. Because they fear the consequences of the decision. And a lot of it is the simplest thing of giving up Christmas. You have no idea how many millions of people don't become believers just for something as simple as that. They don't want to offend their family for giving up Christmas and not being able to accept it. It's not even that they want the Christmas gift. It's the consequence of the decision with the family that they will do it. That's a reactive person. A reactive person, I'm telling you, is going to have a very hard time ever getting into the kingdom. Proactive people, you're making your decisions that are not based on fearing the consequence. Okay? You can choose your decision, you can't choose the consequence. Proactive person makes decisions based on the values and their principles and the truth, not the consequences. And I'll tell you, that's why I love reading the book that I put together, The Gates of Hell. I love reading the book. Because you see the people there, you see the character that these people are. And under the worst circumstances, you're not talking about, vaccine mandates then. You're talking about the Catholic Church either telling him, you're going to come and go on. And sometimes it was as simple as just baptizing a baby, I mean, as wrong as it is, right? If it comes to the point that they're going to kill you if you don't just take your little baby and put it in the water. And a lot of people might think, well, would Yahweh want me to die? Would he want my child to die? So what's the big deal? I don't believe it anyway. Let him go in the water for a second, we'll do it. You know what they said? Not for a second. Not for a second, because you know what? If I put that baby in that water, it's not about that baby just getting wet and I don't believe it. I am submitting to you. I am coming under your authority. And I'm becoming like you. And they said, whether Yahweh stops us from doing this, whether he stops you from doing this and he saves us, that's up to him. We know he can do it. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But don't think for a second, we are going to, for 1 second, give our authority up to you, to the Catholic Church. It's that simple. And the Apostle Paul said that. Remember with the circumcision? When they were trying to force it? He said, not for a second are we going to do this. Not for a second. And here we are, we're living in those times because the consequences of our decisions are getting greater. Right? Or let's say there's a greater consequence to those decisions. But we have to keep our integrity, because if you lose your integrity, what else do you have? Your decisions have to be based on your values, your principles, and the truth. And once you give that up, you really have nothing left. And that's why I said, you look in Scripture, there's people that live until 30 years old, there's people that live to 963 years old, but they all die sooner or later anyway. And like they said, every man dies, but not every man truly lives. It's not the matter of time you're on the earth, it's the quality of what you do during that time. That's all that matters. Because eternity is a long time. And that's what we're looking forward to. We can't even concept it. But you can concept it a little bit as you get older. Because as you get older, doesn't the time seem to go faster? But it really isn't. You know why? Because when you're 10 years old, that one summer that seemed to go on forever was 1/10 of your life, right? But then when you're 50, 1 year is 1/50th of your life. So think to Yahweh, who has no time. That's why a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. And sometimes when people say, how did Yahweh allow this? How can he allow suffering? He only allowed it for 1 week to teach us, right? He can go through this torture for 1 week, but to him 1,000 years is like a day, so he's talking about 6,000 years. But it all comes and goes anyway. And then once you close your eyes, there's nothing else you could do, good or bad. You read the Bible, and whether you're reading about King David, or you're reading about, wicked Manasseh, there's nothing they can do from this point, good or bad. Whatever is there is there. It's done. Your judgment is based on that. We have another day. At least one, at least this hour. Maybe tomorrow, one of us won't even be here. That's up to Yahweh. But you have to take advantage of that. You have to make sure that you kept your principles, you kept your values. Because once you contradict that, you have nothing left. Because you're a contradiction to yourself. Where do you go from there? Once you have that. And really, then Yahweh, because that's the only thing Yahweh is trying to test us on. Our character. Do we have the character to stand? Like I said, reactive person is addicted to victimhood. He has no vision for tomorrow. Only accusations when they fail. Titus 1 and verse 15. It says, all things are pure to the pure, but nothing is pure to those being defiled and faithless. But even their mind and their conscience has been defiled. They profess to know Yahweh, but by their works they deny Him, and they are abominable and disobedient, condemning every kind of good work. So this is what you have when you have the reactive person, right? It doesn't matter what's happening, it doesn't matter, it's just always something negative. Always something that's negative, and it's their viewpoint right from. And then I'm going to mention, just for a little bit, the third type of person. I'm not going to mention too much of this, because it really doesn't affect too much what we're doing, but I want to mention it because they are there. They're called the no-active person. The no-active person. So we have the proactive, you have the reactive, but then you have the no-active. Who's a no-active person? The no-active person is basically someone that just goes along with life as it comes. They have really no ambition to better themselves, and they're fully satisfied with the status quo. Their thing is always, things will be okay. It's like, hey, the house is on fire. Someone will call the fire department. They'll put it out, don't worry. They're just always the status quo, just basically going on. Things will be okay, things will get better, but they never have a plan to make it better. Right? So when you're dealing with a no-active person that says, no, it's going to get better, ask them, do you have a plan to make it better? They don't have a plan. They're just hoping that it will get better, but they never have a plan to make it better. They really don't have goals to better themselves. But where the trickery is with the no-active person is, right off the bat, as I'm saying, is people would think they're lazy people or they're not smart people. They're really not. They're not lazy people. There's people that are like this that will work every day of their life for 30 or 40 years. And they're very smart. Some of them are technicians and they're scientists. The problem is, as long as they have that job and they're doing it, they're doing fine. But what happens when the job is gone? You don't know how many people work for 25, 30 years, Their job is gone, and then they never work again. And it's not that they're lazy. They just no active people. They just don't know what to do at that point. So these are people that as long as they can do the same thing over and over again, they'll do it. They're not lazy, they're smart, but they have no plan for anything else. They never think about anything else. They just kind of go with it. And then, when the problem arises, like I said, they lose their job or whatever, they have no way to get out because they never had a plan. The greatest freedom we have in life is freedom of choice. Right? That's what makes us different than the animal kingdom. Like I said, we are creatures of habit like animals. We are conditioned like animals. But we have freedom of choice. So you won't see, like maybe you live in an area where there's 5 cats you won't see running around. You won't see all of a sudden you come out one day to take out the garbage and you see these cats all huddled around. And the one cat saying to the other cats, hey, I heard it's going to be a pretty bad winter coming this winter. Why don't we head down north? And if we do it now, it's only September, we can actually build our cat huts before the winter comes. And then maybe we could work on seeing where the best garbage is. They don't think that way. Animals don't think that way. We have free will. We have free choice. And our greatest freedom is our free choice. Right? So people can hurt us. They can lie to us. They can even imprison us. But they can't take your freedom on how you will react. And that's powerful. And as we're getting closer to the time we're in, it's really powerful. And when I think of this, I think of Richard Wurmbrand. Because Richard Wurmbrand, everybody knows Richard Wurmbrand, right? Richard Wurmbrand was really never in prison. He really was never in prison. Because prison is a mindset, right? And I tell that, you have no idea, in Babylon, basically, our whole ministry in Babylon is to prisoners now. We have some brethren still there, please pray for them, but it's very, very small. But we have hundreds of prisoners every single month that we're sending Bibles and stuff to. Can't keep up with it, And we have congregations in prisons. And I always write to them and say, like the warning, Yahweh is your warning, you've been freed. They can keep you in that place for who knows, maybe a day, maybe a year, maybe until you die. But you're free. You're free because once you give your mind over to the beast, once you give your mind over to Satan out of fear, and it doesn't matter whether it's taking a vaccine, it doesn't matter whether it's wearing mixed clothing, right? Or whatever it is, whenever you violate Yahweh's word because you fear losing something, you become the servant of what you obey. And you become the servant of that. So when you have that free will and that free choice, that's powerful. Because no man can do anything to you. Because you have the freedom on how you will react. And I think of Richard Wurmbrand, that one time, where they beat the guy so bad, his hands are cuddled, his face is all beat up, and the guard comes, and he's just angry, he's looking at him, he sees Richard Wurmbrand, they're praying, and he opens the door, he's like, after your Elohim did this, what on earth? Look at you, what can you be praying for? And when his begging face, he looks at the guy and he says, I'm praying for you. Can you imagine? I'm praying for you. And his wife, Sabina, the guard that killed her father and mother, came to faith because she forgave that man. So always think about that. We have free will. Never give that up. They can do anything they want to our body, just like it says. Don't fear him who can kill the body. Fear him who can take the body and soul and kill it again. We have the freedom on how we react. And there should be no fear in the kingdom of Yahweh. We are ambassadors for that kingdom. And that kingdom is approaching. Kingdom is approaching, I don't know if you heard, but I already got the email from heaven. Wars broke out. Right? Read Revelation 12. Wars broke out already. So you know what that means? What's the first thing that happens when war breaks out? You recall your ambassadors. You got to recall your ambassadors, and it's time to come out of this world. Yahweh's recalling us because it's not to be in that world anymore. It's time we got to separate. So in the meantime, they might do whatever they might do, to us as ambassadors. But never give that free will up. And that's what a proactive person has. A proactive person has the character to do that. Greatest freedom you have is freedom of choice. Matthew 5 and verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not stand against the evil, but whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And to him desiring to sue you and take your coat, allow him also to take the cloak. And whoever shall compel you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. He asking you to give, and he wishing to borrow from you, do not turn away. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do well to those who hate you, and pray for those who take you by force and persecute you, so that you may become sons of your Father in heaven, because he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those loving you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you only greet your brothers, what exceptional thing do you do? Do not the tax collectors do the same? Therefore you become perfect or complete, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. So I say this is unhuman. This goes against everything of our human nature. But the Spirit of Yahweh is not human. Right? Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. And this is one of the biggest proofs to me that the road we're on is the right road. You know, I've heard people before that quit, and they're reactive people, and they'll make excuses. They'll say, you talk to them, and they'll say, oh, this person hurt me. And they're supposed to be believers, right? And they did this, and they did this, and this person. And how can a believer do something like that? You know, this is supposed to be Yahweh's congregation. Maybe it's even an elder, right? And they're going to quit Yeshua's congregation because of what somebody else did, when in most cases they do worse anyway. It's just an excuse that they have. But when I look at this, that's why no matter what anybody would do, if everybody went the wrong way, or everybody quit, because I look at this and I say, this is unhuman. If you can have the Spirit of Yahweh, there's no way you would ever do this. You know, it is, the Apostle Paul said, you know, possibly, you know, in a rare circumstance, one might die for an unrighteous man. And maybe you might even die for a good person, right? But think about this, somebody that's evil. Why on earth would you die for somebody that's evil? You know? But it's because the Spirit of Yahweh. The Spirit of Yahweh transcends everything like that. And you just never know. You know? Yeshua came to call the prostitutes and the tax collectors, not the righteous. So you just never know. And in these situations, no matter how bad or how evil somebody treats us, we have the ability to overcome that. But only if you're proactive. If you're reactive, you'll never do that. It'll always say, you talk to me, this, how dare you? You'll always be thinking on feelings and emotions. You won't be thinking on principle and character. Deuteronomy 30, in verse 15. Says, behold, I set before you today life and good, and death and evil. Verse 19, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today. They have set before you life and death, and blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that you and your seed may live. Choose life, that you and your seed may live. Even Yahweh doesn't take away our free will. He has to choose life, though. But we have the free will. We have to choose it. You know, it's not just going to happen. You have to choose it, and it's something that you have to focus on. It's something you have to work on. And in the world we're living in, with every distraction, you know, it's something you have to do every single day of your life. Like I said, I'm amazed sometimes where things come up or problems come up. Sometimes world problems, sometimes it could be problems in people's lives. And again, whatever you focus on becomes most real to you. So there are big problems sometimes. It could be even death. It could be loss of a job. It could be loss of money. It could be anything. They are big problems. I'm not trying to minimalize problems we have in our life. But sometimes I've seen people almost forget everything they knew because of that problem they're dealing with at the time. You know? And so too, this will pass. Believe me, I've dealt with big problems, and I know how they can weigh you down. But boy, I just have something in my mind that I will not let anything in my life go past her. I will not let my mind get to that point where I'm going to get into depression or I'm going to get away from Yahweh. Period. There is nothing that will stop me from that. And it's a choice you have to make because we're all human. And if you don't make that choice, you will get there. And I can tell you that. I know years back, when I got into depression, it would last for years, and then I couldn't get out of it. And I'm thinking, what? I hate this. Why am I doing this? And it was so bad that I say now, there ain't no way I'm going there again. Because being reactive doesn't make you feel better. It doesn't make you happy. You know, it's just an excuse not to deal with yourself. Because the problem is always you. You know, each of us have to deal with ourselves. We are our own problem. And that's what we have to deal with. And being reactive will never help you deal with yourself. Because it always can blame somebody else. So you have to, as a proactive person, you have to make sure that Yahweh is so far ahead in number one in your life and priority that there is nothing that is going to let you get anywhere near that. You've got to put that bubble around you. Because like I said, we're all human, and if not, wow, when you come down, boy, it's hard to come out of that cellar. It really is hard. I don't know if you ever heard of a man called Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor. And he wrote several books about Holocaust survivors that he saw from the inside, you know, and he wondered, why would some people survive and some people didn't? He saw some people that just quit and gave up and wanted to die and did die. And then he saw others that no matter what, during the torture, the beating, even having sometimes family members killed, they just wouldn't quit. And this guy was a psychologist, and he was trying to figure out what was the difference that made the people survive from the people who didn't. And at the end of the day, they chose life. The people that survived chose life. They were proactive. They believed they had a purpose to survive. They had a vision for the future. They just said, there's no way that Elohim created me to end here in this place. Even if it's only to give my testimony of what happened here. Because if we all die, nobody's going to know how bad it was inside that camp. And some of them they just willed themselves that they would survive to be able to tell that story to the next generation. So it would never happen again. And that's what happens sometimes. There's things that go on in life. Some very, very horrible things. Rape and things like that. And you can either take that empowering or disempowering. And if you take it disempowering, as bad as that is, then you know what? You are giving that perpetrator control of your life every single day that you give that power over to that. You can't let that happen. If for nothing else to help that next person, that it doesn't happen to somebody else. So whatever you went through in your life, take it as a point of empowerment. That, wow, I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to somebody else. I'm going to share it, I'm going to talk, and I'm going to make this. You know, you've probably seen recently in America, there's a terrible story of a young girl who got murdered, probably by the boyfriend. The boyfriend disappeared now. And, you know, the family in a lot of these situations, they will not even talk to the media. They're too distraught. They don't want anything. But the parents really came out and they talked, especially the father. He said, you know, this girl's 22 years old, and everybody, you never think it's going to be you. You never think it's going to be your family. Nobody does. Who would ever, why would you even think that? But he said, the fact that there's because every day there's missing people. Every day there's children being killed. He said the fact that, I don't know why, but that we got all this publicity and that the focus came to us. He said, I can't just focus on my loss for my daughter. I got to take this as empowerment to help other people by this now. I got to make sure that all this media attention and that everybody's honest, that this can mean something more than this poor situation of whatever happened. And now they made an endowment, you know, that they want to help other young people. Because there's a lot of abuse going on. Going on with, you know, husbands abusing wives and different things like that. And that's the point we got to look at. When you have loss in life, no matter how bad that loss is, you can't just use it as a focal point of yourself to feel sorry for yourself. You have to use it as a point of empowerment to better you and other people. Or how else would it ever happen? You know? Somebody that was raped, and they may ask me, why would Yahweh ever allow that? And I say, because on day one when the kingdom comes, we're going to be going all over the world, and we're going to be going up to people and helping them. And when we come up and pat them on the back and say, don't worry, things are getting better, there's a new king that's here. And things are going to be totally different before. And you know what these people are going to say, some of these humans? Because they don't know. They're not believers. They just happen to survive this horror that happened. And they're going to say, how would you know? They'll think we're angels or something. You're an angel. How would you know? And a person will turn and say, no, I know. It happened to me. I know what you're going through. Why did Yeshua come on the earth for 32 and a half years? Like I said, if it was to die for our sins, he could have been here 3 days. 3 days and 3 nights. He came here and he suffered, he was abused, he was quit by his friends, and when they needed him the most, on the very night he's ready to die for them, they're all running away. He sees Peter and he's saying, I don't know him. And yet he still went through it. Because it says in Hebrews that we can have a high priest who knows what we're going through. When we get on our hands and knees, you can't say, Yeshua, you don't know what I'm going through. Oh, yes, he does. Anything we're going through, he went through before, so that he knows exactly what we're going through. And we're going through things now for that reason. For now that we can help people that are going through it, and when the kingdom comes. Because we've got to be ready from day one. You know, when the kingdom comes, there's not going to be years and years and years of training for us. This is the training. This is the training to get you ready. So that when Yeshua returns and we shed these earthly bodies and we rise up in the air to meet him, you know, we're going to have our wedding supper. We're going to drink that glass of wine with him, you know, in heaven with the Father. We're going to have a great time, you know. Honeymoon will be short because there's a lot of work to do. But then after that, it's work. It's work for all those suffering people in the world. That's got to be our focus. That has got to be our focus. And this is what makes the difference between, like I said, proactive and reactive. And you really got to take these notes later. Think about it again. Really think in my life. Maybe you've been 80% proactive, but 20% reactive, and there has to be. Maybe you're 50-50, or maybe it's even worse. So there has to be change where it comes. Matthew 8:28, the Great Commission, right? What is the Great Commission? Coming up, Yeshua talked to them, saying, all authority in heaven and earth is given to me. Then having gone, disciple all nations. This is the direct command as his ambassadors, what he's telling them. Disciple all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things, whatever I command you. Behold, I am with you all the days to the completion of the age. And here we are at the completion of the age. It hasn't happened yet, so he's still here with us. What does this sound like? This is a proactive commission, right? To go into all the world and to do this. It's not being reactive. It's not sitting back in a chair and waiting for them to come. I always use the example. That's what it is. A proactive person gets things done. You've got to get a vision. You've got to get a plan of action. You know, you got to work, which is going to be our point 2. We'll get to in a minute. So it is powerful to control your free choice. People can control your environment, but not how you will react. So that's the point now. Like, we can't have our focus on the environment that we have no control over. There's nothing we can do. What we need to do is we need to get a plan of action how we will react to that, right? And that we can do. That we have. We have free choice. Satan can only tempt you to do wrong when you are emotionally immature and undisciplined. The New World Order can make immunity passports, they can restrict your travel, they can stop you from working, but you have freedom on how you will react. Stay committed, not take the mark of the beast or the poisonous COVID shot. This is why we prepare now, because we're proactive, right? And that's why I said, you know, logic will tell you, if you look at the Amish have no problem. They have no problem whatsoever. It's really interesting because they kind of went on their own from the beginning. When they were told, like, when relatives die, you can't go near them, they have COVID, all this horrible stuff. I had more people I know die in the last year and a half than in my whole life. A lot of relatives and friends of different people. But the Amish said, no, that doesn't work. I'd rather comfort my dying father and be able to give him a hug and risk getting sick than let him die alone. And you know what happened? They all got COVID. They all got COVID. But they all overcame COVID. They all got immunity, herd immunity. You know what the Amish do now? They don't take the vaccine. Their life is normal as anything. So you know what? They're not going to be able to work. They're not going to be able to go. They don't work in the society. Their kids aren't in public school. So their lives virtually haven't changed at all. So you really have to think to yourself, how much all these things going on affect you is basically depends on how much you're part of the world. The more you're out of that society, they can do whatever they want in their society. But it won't affect you. So that's the key to it is now. Being proactive, this is the time to plan. Number 2, begin or plan with the end in mind. And plan with the end in mind. So, what happens is, I think, we know that our main goal, our main focus is always going to be the kingdom of Yahweh. But then other things crop up and other things come up. And then all of a sudden, we make decisions on that. But they contradict that goal. And they work against that goal. So maybe you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to get out of America. I see what's happening there. They're bringing in this vaccine passport. I can't get stuck there. I'm going to leave, so I'll plan out. I don't know. I'll take 6 months up to a year, but then I really need to get out of here. And that's your goal because you're figuring what's coming there in America. Then talk to the person 2 months later. It's like, oh, guess what? I just bought a house. Bought a house? What do you mean you bought a house? Well, the rent was so high, I'm going to buy a house. And I'm thinking, buy a house? I thought you said you're getting out of there. See, you got to think with the end in mind. Maybe buying the house might have been a good idea because you're paying so much in rent. But it's not thinking with the end in mind. You got to think with the end in mind. Story years ago, you have to think with the end in mind. And this is the problem. We do it in theory, but then when crisis rises up, we don't think with the end in mind anymore. Because we're trying to deal with that particular crisis that's at hand. But it's really, really important. Change, character growth are not a quick fix. It's not a life hack that you see on YouTube. One of these 2-minute videos, how to change your life in 2 minutes. Petra likes a lot of these life hacks. Some of them are good, actually. How to do this or how to do that, But you can't change your life in 2 minutes. It's not a life hack to do that. It's a lifelong effort. It's built on reinforcing daily your core values and beliefs. Right? So when we look at our core values, we went over this before, but I'll just mention the ones we talked about. What are core values and decisions based on? Honesty, integrity, loyalty, hard work, loving neighbor as self, importance of family, never quitting or compromising, always following judicial order, always give your best, always raise the bar in everything you do, like Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatever your hand finds to do with all your might. Do everything as a child of Yahweh. Respect for Elohim and authority, such as parents, older people, teachers, ministers, police. These are the basic for values. I'll mention them one more time. I could write them down later if you want, but we went over this many times before. Core values: honesty, integrity, loyalty, hard work, loving neighbor as self, importance of family, never quit or compromise, always follow judicial order, always give your best, always raise the bar in everything, do as a child of Yahweh, respect for Elohim, and respect for authority, such as parents, older people, teachers, ministers, police, and those kind of things. So, we have to daily be reinforcing these core values in the decisions we make. And I'll tell you something, the biggest thing I deal with people in the last few years, even before COVID, of problems they're having in their life, particularly in Western society, not so much in third world, but sometimes in third world, is because people are compromising on their values. They're compromising on their core values, and they're miserable, and then they're coming and wondering why. And I think about just your job, right? Except for sleep, whatever you do as a job for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, right? That's a lot of time on your hands. And like I said, I could just as easily do something that's not against Yahweh than to do something that's against Yahweh. So how on earth can you work a job, say like in a cigarette factory, all day long you're making cigarettes, that you know are going to kill somebody? Or maybe in a pharmaceutical company. You're the one making these pharmaceuticals that kill somebody. How can you do that for 8 or 10 hours a day and be happy when it's absolutely 100% against your core values? There's no way you could ever do that. And yet there's people that do this in life, not just with work, but with many things. They're compromising on Christmas. They're compromising on birthdays. They're compromising on these things that they know are wrong, and they're doing it anyway, and they're waiting for a better result to come. That's what they say, somebody that's insane. Who's somebody that's insane? They do the same thing, wrong thing over and over, thinking they're going to get a different outcome. So you have to think about this, that the decisions you're making in your life are built on reinforcing daily your core values and belief. And then when big things come up, they're never going to be a problem. Because it's just another decision. But if you're constantly compromising and constantly moving the bar in your life of what you think is right and what you think is wrong, then when the bigger decisions come, all it's going to mean is a bigger move of that bar. But if you're always going on principle, like we were saying before, being proactive, you're going on principle and truth, you'll never compromise. Because like I said, you're not thinking of the consequence, you're thinking of the decision. You have no control over the consequence, but you do have control over the decision. And I want you to think of yourself now. Think of yourself going to a funeral. You're coming in, and here it is, this bunch of people there, and you come in to this funeral, and you walk in the door, maybe friends and family there, and then all of a sudden, you come up to the front of the person that died, and you look in the coffin, and it's me! The death in this world. What you have to fear is losing your life for not sticking by your values and your principles. I remember my grandma. My grandma was in her 90s when she passed away. She was a good lady, had all her senses to her. And except for her family, every single person she knew had died. She knew nobody else that was still living that she knew. And she was really sad because she didn't want to die. The last time I saw her, we knew she was going to die. Her organs were starting to fail. And she was telling me, I want to be at your wedding. She used to sing, even in her 90s, she used to sing at all of the cousins' weddings and all that stuff. And she was such a good lady. She loved her family. But you know what? There's just a time to be born and there's a time to die. And what if she lived another 3 years, another 5 years, another 10 years? What if she lived to 108? There's people now, I think the oldest one's 117. Is it going to make any difference if you lose to 120? It's what we do while we have it. And that's why, time being short, you look at some of the people that made such a difference in such a short time. Good and bad. Look at someone like Alexander the Great, right? One of the greatest generals in the world. He died at 32 years old. From 20 years old, 12 years conquered the world, And, wow, 32 he was dead. But his legacy, not to say it's necessarily a good one, although he didn't invade Jerusalem. That was good, because he felt that Zechariah was written about him, so he didn't invade Jerusalem. But that's why I say, being proactive and being bearing fruit for Yahweh, it doesn't have to take years and years and years. It's every day of our life. It's in those little decisions. It starts in the home, how we treat our family, how we treat our wife and our husband and our children, how we treat our friends and our neighbors and our brethren, and then the fruit we're bearing from there. You know, and I look at Elder Cliff, who just passed away, and, you know, he was a very good friend of mine, and it makes me sad because I knew him from 1996, you know, and even before I met my wife, I used to go to Florida and I used to do meetings down there, and I met him. We were doing home meetings. That was after Church of God broke up. And all of a sudden, this older lady we were meeting in her house, she said, "Oh, I have some friends I knew from Church of God. I hope you don't mind. I invited them." I said, "Not at all." No. Cliff comes in, bowering in, you know, he's got this t-shirt on that says Yahweh. You know, he's like, "How are you doing? Cliff Rodriguez." And I looked at his shirt and I said, "I like this man." He said, "That's his name. His name is Yahweh." And we just hit it off right off the bat because he's a real person, you know. And I just felt with his passing, like in-year ended. You know, he was like one of the first guys that started with me there. And it was sad to me. I'm happy for him. You know, he was working right up to the end. You know, he would contact me and want to be taking trips and want to be doing this. And I'm like, "Cliff, you got to get yourself strong first." He's like, "I'm all right. Someone will come with me." You know, even not that long before he died, he went out to Washington State and baptized some people. But after he passed away, you know, and looking at some of the things that his family wrote, you know, his grandchildren, his different family, you see, well, this was somebody that really had a lot of respect, and everybody loved him. You know, and that's what you want. That's why I say, you know, what's your legacy? You know, just about everybody here. I think we went over this a little bit last year. I hope everybody has a legacy written down, because if you don't have one written down, it's not going to happen. Like I said, this is not an emotional talk, you know, to get you inspired for lunch. You don't need to be inspired for lunch. Really don't. This is something to get you inspired for eternity, and you need a legacy. You need to have it written down. You need to look at it. You need to know what your life is about. You know, you need to know why you're living every day. What are the most important things in your life? And when we look at the kingdom, and it's never been more evident to me than in this past year with COVID, that we really believe this. You know, like, where is Yahweh in this world? You see him nowhere. You don't even see him in churches anymore. You know, even churches, I mean, they're all just going along with the flow. And Yahweh's not in this world, and this is the hard part, because we're creatures of habit, and every day you're in the world, and your mind is being indoctrinated with everything that is fake, and then you're living in this pseudo-world of the kingdom, and it's very difficult. You know, it's very difficult. And that's why, though, every day of your life, for your own sanity, your own spiritual sanity, you have to be focused on this. In your Bible study, in your prayer, in your meditation, you got to know what's real and what's not. You know, because if not, what happens? There's an overlap that comes when crises come and when trials come, and all of a sudden, that world out there becomes your reality, and the kingdom of Yahweh goes to the back burner. That's why I say you have to plan with the end in mind. You know, you got to plan with the end in mind. And Yahweh is not in this world whatsoever. We are not the person that we were, hopefully. We are not the person that we were, but we're also not the person that we will become. You have to think every day on change. Think with the end in mind. There's a process we have to go through for the resurrection, and that's not just going to happen. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 42. But also is the resurrection of the dead. It's sown in corruption, it's raised in incorruption. It's sown in dishonor, it's raised in glory. It's sown in weakness, it's raised in power. There is a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There's a natural body and there's a spiritual body. Right? These two worlds side by side. Verse 52. In a moment, in the blinking of an eye, at the last trumpet, the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall all be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. Wow. Got to think with the end in mind. You know, as you get older, you get up, there's aches and pains. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was out in the garden pouring dirt, and my back went out, and I just went down. I couldn't even get up. I had to crawl. I think Mariah and Petra thought I might have had a heart attack because I was just laying there screaming. I couldn't get up. I couldn't move. I mean, it was like this squeezing, in my back. But you just think about that it's strange because, like I said, we're living in this facade, this fake world, and yet we're trying to hold on to these bodies instead of shedding these bodies, looking for that glorious body. That's why I say all these crazy things of, makeup and coloring your hair and all this other stuff, Even when people die sometimes, you go to ooh, he looks pretty good, doesn't he? Like he's dead. Looks pretty good. He's dead in there, They try to make the person up and make him look real good, It's like, come on. Even in death. But that's what these people look for. That's all they have. All they have is this life. So when that goes, they don't believe in a resurrection. And that's what I say, when I die, you'll see me in that coffin with a smile on my face. And just see you later. See you on the other side. There's nothing here to hold on to. As long as Yahweh has for a purpose, that's great, but when that purpose is over, there ain't anything in this world that I want. Nothing whatsoever. You've got to think with the end in mind. The person you are today is stemmed from the person you were yesterday, and it's rooted in who you will be tomorrow. So, like I said, change just doesn't happen. You've got to work on it. You are the person today. It's stemmed from where you were yesterday, and if change doesn't come, you're going to be the same person tomorrow. And that's why I say, and I don't know if you really concept this, but the kingdom of Yahweh is a constant. If you go into the kingdom of Yahweh with a broken leg, you'll have a broken leg for eternity. Because nothing changes in the kingdom of Yahweh, it's a constant. But that's why you won't go home with a broken leg. That's why when Yeshua returns, what happens? He heals all sickness. There is no death. The last enemy is death. Because once we get there, it'll be a constant. But if you don't overcome these things now, you're not going to go into the kingdom of Yahweh with anger, with hate, with lust, with greed, and with covetous spirits. We need to overcome these things so that we're ready. The person you are today is stemmed to the person you were yesterday, and it's rooted in who you will be tomorrow. This is why your belief system and your core values are so important. The Ten Commandments are the character of Yahweh. They're His character. They're not just a bunch of do's and don'ts, but they're His characters. Just as your core values have led to the person you are today, Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things will be given to you. Right? Proactive person has focus, drive, ambition, and zeal for the work of Yahweh. All decisions, goals, priorities are for the kingdom. All decisions, goals, and priorities for the kingdom. And I've read this many times in Matthew 10. The one loving father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. The one loving son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up his torch or stake and follow after me is not worthy of me. The one finding his life will lose it. And the one losing his life on account of me shall find it. And I say, because we love Yahweh more, it doesn't mean we love our family less. Because we love Yahweh more, it doesn't mean we love our family less. But you better love Yahweh more. And if you don't have a personal relationship, if you don't hear His voice, if you don't hear Him speaking to you from His Word, there's a problem. You have to know Him in a personal way. Exodus 20, 1-3, right? And Elohim spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who has brought you out from the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. You shall not have any Elohim before my face. The first greatest commandment, we are to love Yahweh with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And if you do that, everything else in life falls apart. Because you know something? I tell people this sometimes when I'm counseling for marriage, that you don't know that person could be there for 1 year, they could be there for 50 years in marriage. But that person you're marrying, male or female, doesn't matter. If you're male or female, you're marrying a husband or a wife. That person isn't going to be there at your judgment day. And that person can't change you. They can help you, they can inspire you. But you have to change. You have to have that relationship with Yahweh. You can't do it for somebody 57. That is the focus of my life. Because nothing's changed. If anything, my faith is only 1,000 times magnified. So it's either true or it's not. Either Yahweh parted that Red Sea or He didn't. It can't be hope. It can't be, boy, this world's so big, I sure hope he's up there. If that's all you got, bye-bye. You ain't going to make it. You're not going to make it on hope. You got to make it on faith. You got to make it on belief. It's full assurance. Because if you don't have that, when the tough times come, you will never go through it. Like I said, you'll become reactive. You'll go on emotions. You'll go on feelings. You know? And you have to be this way. You have to have the end in mind. You've got to focus on the kingdom of Yahweh every single day. It's got to be your thought with every single action that comes. And community helps us to be this way, right? Because when you live in community, then you're not the oddball out there. You know, you're not the oddball out there where all the world's thinking one way and you have to fight this every day. When you're in community, it actually is cool water to your soul because everybody's thinking that way. Everybody, the system that you're thinking in your mind is being enacted every single day in that community. How wonderful, right? To wake up and have devotions with the whole community every day before everybody goes out to work. You have your devotion every day. It could be 10 or 20 minutes, but you start the day together as a community. To eat together as a community. Worship together as a community. Live together as a community. So this helps us to keep this way. And you have to have a plan of action. You know, like I said, unfortunately we don't have the time here. I went over most of you goal setting. I hope you're still doing it. You know, you should have a plan of action. You should have a goal to everything. And the more defined that plan of action is, the greater you're going to accomplish it. So I say, take something simple. You want to lose weight. You can't just have a goal, I want to lose weight. Because it's not a defined enough goal. You'll think about it for a day or two and then that'll be it. No, you have to say, I want to lose 20 pounds by this date. And like I said, it's got to be in writing, because once it's in writing, you can't change it. It's there. Now it's part of history. A, I'm not going to eat fried foods. B, I won't eat between meals. C, I'm only going to eat vegetables, whatever it is. You know, you have to have a plan of action, and then you've got to read it every day. And then after a week, you see, is it working out? Now it's not really working out. I need to put sugar on this. Okay, let me put down no white sugar, no cookies, no donuts. And then you have to keep looking, you have to keep molding it, you have to keep shaping it. But you got to have a plan of action. And I've said this many times before. The most successful people in the world are not the richest people. You know, they're not the ones that had the most education or came from the best families. They're the ones who had goals and wrote them down. Because that's going to make you accomplish it. You got to write it down and then you got to follow through. And that's being proactive. Because a proactive person, just that it's in writing, will do it. You know? So I love it because it actually makes me feel good that at the beginning of the week I can have a list of 30 things to do. I'm like, there's only 1 week to the feast. But the great part is, as I keep checking them off and checking them off and checking them off, you feel good about it. You're feeling a sense of accomplishment. So I might say to myself, you know what? I'm not going to have that cup of coffee until I do these 5 things. And then you do those 5 things, like, now I deserve that coffee. I got this done. And it's got to be the most important things. You know, you can't leave the most important things to the last and have, you know, goal 1, brush my teeth. You know, goal 2, walk to the refrigerator. It's got to be important stuff that you're getting done. And then the other things are fillers that you fill in. A lot of people do the opposite. They have mostly fillers, and then the important stuff gets shoved somewhere. But you got to do it. You got to have it. And this is what's going to make you be very, very productive. People ask me all the time, especially with traveling, how do I get so much done as one person? And I can honestly say 100% it's doing this. Without doing this, because there's times where I don't have things written down, and I'll say, wow, this week went by quick, and I didn't get a lot of stuff done, and I realized because I didn't have it written down. But when I have it written down, I'll do it. Because I have to. You know, it's like, it's there, and there's something in you that makes you get it done. So we want to make sure. The other thing is having your priorities straight. Number 3. Number 3, and it kind of goes with working with the end in mind. Having your priorities straight. As believers, we must focus on relationships before schedule. So what can happen is, and There was a guy I knew many, many years ago in the Church of God. He was actually one of my elders when I was very young, Mr. Sargent. And his name fit his personality. He was a real good guy, though. You know, I mean, he was like, when I met him, he was almost 50, and he looked like he was 30. And he was a runner. He used to run every day, like 5 miles. But, like, he had every single thing written down in his life. You know, wake up, 6:12. Brush my teeth, 6:13, 34 seconds. 7:02, eat the cornflakes. 7:04, kiss my wife. I mean, everything. I couldn't believe the charts he was showing me for his cars, which is good to a degree. But, you know, it's about people. It's about people. And what happens is sometimes, when you get too much into the goal-setting part of it and the schedule part of it, you miss the aspect of the relationship. So why we're trying to do this is to make our relationships better, right? As a father, if I don't do this, that means I have less time with my wife and my daughter. That means I have less time with Yahweh. So I'm doing this to make my relationships better. Not to just get a mentality of, you know, schedules and cycles. We need to understand to live out your principles and priorities. Right? Because time goes quick, and we all know it. If we don't have focus to it, we simply won't get it done. You have to know what you want your legacy to be. Like I said, every one of you, if you don't have it, you better do it quick. Write down, I want my legacy to be this. And then you get a plan of action for it. I want to be known as a leader of Yahweh that never compromised, that was loving, that people could come to, that was caring. Okay, that's great. Good thing to put on a tombstone, but it doesn't make it real. What makes it real is having a plan of action, and then every day of my life working toward that plan. But without the SBS, specific purpose statement, without having that written down, you don't know what you're working toward. So you need to have it. And what should it be based on? It should be based on your spiritual gifts that Yahweh's given you. Because Yahweh made us as human beings. When are you the happiest in your life? When you're helping people, right? But not just when you're helping people. When you're helping people at something you excel at. Doesn't that make you really happy? So, if you're a builder, right? And you can help to build the congregational hall, you feel great when you're putting that into practice. So Yahweh gave us spiritual gifts for a reason. Doesn't mean we won't do anything. Any of us will set up chairs and do whatever has to be done. That's fine, you know. But I'm talking about as far as your plan of action, as far as your ministry plan, it should be based on what your spiritual gifts are. If not, it's not going to be enjoyable. Like, if I had to be an interpreter, I am Italian, so I can speak with my hands. But I'm not really good at languages. So that would not be enjoyable for me. And it certainly wouldn't be enjoyable for the person I'm interpreting for, because they get mostly nothing out of it. You know? But if it's something I'm good at, like this, some people say, how on earth can you go up there? How can you speak? How can you do service? I'm so scared. And it's actually the number one fear in life is public speaking. People actually fear public speaking more than fearing death. To me, I just reframed it. I don't fear it because I'm not thinking about myself. I'm not thinking about making a mistake. I'm not thinking about looking stupid. I'm not thinking about, all I'm thinking about is I can share. I can use this gift to share with people. I can share the word of Yahweh. I can help inspire people. So when you're good at something, you enjoy it because you're benefiting other people. And that's the difference in this world, right? When you look at the big billionaires in the world, they're not doing it to benefit other people. They're doing it to benefit themselves. So when you're thinking of your legacy, you're thinking of your ministry plan, it's got to be something that you're gifted with, because then you're going to be happy and you're going to benefit other people by it. We don't want to let the cares of life get involved. I think I'll skip reading, but you can put in your notes Matthew 6, 25 through 34. We know we've read that many times. Not to be worried about the daily cares of life. But our priorities in life. What should our priorities be in life? Number one, Yahweh. Yahweh's got to be the first and foremost and way above the other ones. How many bars we got left there? 0? Only got about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Number 2 of priorities, and this could change. Everybody's priority doesn't have to be my priority, but I put it this way. Yahweh should be the first one for us, but number 2 should be bearing fruit and growing in the 9 fruits of the Spirit. And let me tell you why I put that before number 3. Number 3 is family. The reason why I put bearing fruit and growing in the 9 fruits of the Spirit before family is because if I put my family before growing in fruit, then I'm really not going to benefit my family. The way I benefit my family is by the fruits I'm growing in. So they're not for me. Those fruits are to benefit other people. So that's why growing in your gifts and the 9 fruits of the Spirit really should be before family, because that's going to benefit your family. Family 3, friends 4, and serving others 5. You know, you could have other things in there, work, whatever. So you can put, these are just the priorities I put, basic priority. But the key is that Yahweh and bearing fruit has got to be our top priorities in life. Set a schedule, like I said, for your priorities. Have it written down. Make sure you're doing the most important things. Genesis 1:26. Genesis 1:26. We'll be finished in about 5 minutes, and we'll just open up for questions and answers. Genesis 1:26. Now Elohim said, "Let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let him rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the heaven, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over all the creepers of the earth." And Elohim created the man in his own image, in the image of Elohim he created him, male and female. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the land, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the heavens, and over all the beasts creeping on the earth." So wow. Yahweh made mankind stewards over the earth. Think about that for a minute. Yahweh made you a steward over the earth. You know what a steward is, right? A steward is a caretaker. So think about it. Think about if you had a garden in your backyard, and all of a sudden Yeshua came to you, and he said, "I want you to be the keeper of this garden for me." How would you go about it? How many weeds would be in that garden? Would you fertilize it? Would you water it? Would you want that fruit? What do you want to do the best for him? And here it is. He's taken this earth that he created, and he's made us stewards over the earth. What has mankind done with it? You know, they destroyed it with every kind of pollution and everything else. But he's really been as stewards of this. Luke 16. Because what happens if we're not proper stewards? Luke 16. Verse 1. And he said to his disciples, "A certain man was rich and had a steward. And this one was accused of him as squandering his wealth. And his master called him and said to him, 'What is this I hear concerning you? Give to me an account of your stewardship. For you are not able any longer to be a steward to me.' And the steward said within himself, 'What should I do? For my master is taking away the stewardship from me. I'm not able to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, that when I am removed from the stewardship, they'll receive me into their houses.' And having called to each one the debtors of his master, he said to the first one, 'How much do you owe my master?' And he said, 100 vessels of oil. And he said, 'Take it and write 50. Then he said to another, 'How much do you owe?' And he said, 100 bushels of wheat. And he said, 'Take it and write 80. And the master applauded, kind of sarcastically this means, not that he's happy he got ripped off, but he's sarcastically applauding the unrighteous steward because he's shrewd, because he acted prudently. For the sons of this age, in Satan's world, are more prudent than the sons of light themselves in their generation. And I also say to you, if you make for yourself friends from their wealth of injustice, when it is consumed, and it will be consumed, They will receive you into their everlasting habitations. What are those habitations? The lake of fire. Some people misquote this. I don't know how they do. Maybe a bad translation. But they think it's a good thing what the unjust steward did. He's not called the unjust steward for nothing. You know, that he stole from his master. But it's not a good thing. He's saying if you do this, you know, that he, how do they say, one hand washes the other and both hands wash the face? If you live that way, and you're doing something unrighteous for somebody else because you're going to get something from them, you're going to end up just like this unrighteous steward here. You know, you're going to end up in the fire. That's what he said. To him that is the least, he faithful in the least is also faithful in much, and he unrighteous in the least is unrighteous in much. Then if you were not faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will entrust you the truth? And if you were not faithful in that of another, who will give to you that which is your own? No servant is able to serve two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or will cling to the one and despise the other. You're not able to serve Yahweh and love. So here it is. Wow, if we are stewards for Yahweh, and that's what I say, we got to think about our jobs. If you're doing a job that is unrighteous before Yahweh, doesn't mean that every job